President Biden held his first news conference of the new year as he marks 1 year in the Oval Office. The milestone comes as the White House faces multiple challenges. The nation is dealing with an increase of coronavirus cases driven by the Omicron variant, and inflation is at a record high. The president is also dealing with issues overseas, including the standoff between Russia and Ukraine. Recent CBS News polling shows the president's approval rating has declined since taking office and currently stands at 44%. CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes reports.
I did not anticipate that there'd be such a stalwart effort to make sure that the most important thing was that President Biden didn't get anything done. Think about this. What are Republicans for?
President Biden argued he's had a successful year one in the face of approval ratings that have fallen 17 points. This afternoon, the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said that the midterm elections are going to be a report card on your progress on inflation, border security, and standing up to Russia. Do you think that that's a fair way to look at it? And if so, how do you think that report card looks right now?
I think report cards can look pretty good if that's where we're at. But look, the idea that Mitch has been very clear. He's going to do anything to prevent Biden from being a success.
With his massive social spending plan stalled in Congress and voting reform expected to fail, Mr. Biden argued it's former President Trump's influence that has prevented him from working more with Republicans.
Did you ever think that one man out of office could intimidate an entire party? I've had 5 Republican senators talk to me, bump into me, quote unquote, or sit with me, who've told me that they agree with whatever I'm talking about for them to do. But Joe, if I do it, I'm going to defeat it in a primary. We got to break that. It's got to change.
Polls also showed declining support for the president's handling of the pandemic, something he acknowledged.
I know there's a lot of frustration and fatigue in this country.
The administration has been heavily criticized for mixed messaging on mask wearing, announcing today they'll send 400 million N95 masks to Americans for free starting next week. The lack of available testing has also been an issue.
Should we have done more testing earlier? Yes, but we're doing more now.
And Nancy joins me now with more from the White House. Hi there, Nancy. So President Biden touted his administration's progress in getting more Americans vaccinated against COVID, but he's faced criticism for his handling of the pandemic and access to testing. Tell us, what else did he have to say?
Well, he acknowledged that his administration could have moved a little more quickly when it comes to testing, could have anticipated the need and perhaps responded, let's say, a month or so sooner. But he argued that things were changing so quickly and this virus has been so unpredictable that under the circumstances, he believes that his team has done pretty well. I asked him whether it is time for the administration to change the definition of being fully vaccinated, especially given the fact that so many of his own medical advisors are arguing that in order to be fully protected, you need to get 3 shots, 2 original shots, or 1 if you got the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and then a booster. And yet, being fully vaccinated, at least according to this government, only involves having 2 shots, not 3. He said that he's leaving that up to the CDC, and he encouraged everyone to get a booster, but he did not get behind the notion of changing that definition. He argued that Americans are going to be able to get back to a more normal life over the next year or so. He said there are already hopeful signs that Omicron is abating, and he pointed out that while we see many stories about various school districts where kids are having to stay home, 95% of schools, he argued, are in fact open with kids going into school right now.
The president also discussed job growth and once again pushed for the passage of his Build Back Better plan. The social and spending climate bill, as you know so well, has been stalled in Congress for months. How confident is he that progress can actually be made on that as we enter year 2 of his presidency?
Well, he was pretty frank on that topic. He sort of came right out and said that he's probably going to have to break that huge $2 trillion bill up into smaller chunks and look at only passing the parts of it that he thinks he can get unanimous Democratic support for in the Senate. So, for example, climate change measures are a big part of that bill, about $500 billion worth. He said that's something that all of the senators, including Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, support in terms of the overall size, even though he's had some disagreements with Senator Manchin about what kinds of climate change measures should be included in that package. So that's something he said could be broken off and passed on its own. He also noted that Senator Manchin is a big supporter of universal pre-K, early childhood education for 3- and 4-year-olds. So that's something else that he argued could be broken off and passed on its own. The problem here is that using the method that Democrats want to use in order to pass this solely with Democratic support, reconciliation, because of Senate rules, they only get a few bites at that apple. It's not as if they can keep endlessly passing various chunks of the Build Back Better law as they reach consensus. They're only going to have an opportunity to do it once or twice this year, so they need to be strategic.
Yeah, or try and break off little chunks that they think they can get Republican support on, and that's going to be perhaps an even tougher road to hoe. So it does seem, though, Nancy, that the administration's focus has shifted away from the Build Back Better bill and more on voting rights recently. Tell us what the president had to say about that, and does that seem like a fair assessment over at the White House?
Well, I think that, the reality when it comes to Build Back Better is that there isn't much to say right now publicly. They are still locked in behind-the-scenes negotiations with Senator Manchin, with Senator Sinema over what they could reach consensus on. And so they haven't had that much to say about it publicly. But that doesn't mean that talks aren't continuing behind the scenes. At the same time, yes, they are making this big push on voting rights. It's not going to go anywhere. But when I asked the president what his strategy is now that his voting rights legislation appears to be stalled, he didn't want to say. He said it'll involve executive orders, but he was about as tight-lipped about it as he was when I asked him about the strategy 10 months ago at his first White House press conference. Whether that's because he doesn't want to show his cards or whether that's because he doesn't have many cards to show remains to be seen. But he was also asked about frustration within the black community over the fact that he waited this long to really focus on voting rights. And he said that that is, quote, a problem of my own making. He acknowledged that he should have been out communicating about this issue sooner.
Very interesting. All right, Nancy, thank you.
You're welcome.